Connected to Josh's iPad.
There we go. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning.
Josh's iPad disconnected.
Sorry about that speaker talking.
AI.
Morning, Thomas.
No, it wasn't me. There was a female voice, no?
Alois or Thomas, do you guys want to lead us today?
I will have to leave after half an hour, so I don't think it's the best idea.
Sorry, can you repeat, Josh?
I was just asking if one of you wants to lead today.
I can also work on notes.
I could take notes if you want to step
Mhm.
back.
All right. Yeah, let's give people then 2 more minutes to join. We shared the agenda already. Thomas shared. Do we have the people for Connect and Quadrant already here?
Yep, I'm from Connect.
Great. Quadrant is then Paul, I assume.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So yeah, general advice for your session for the presentations. Usually there's discussions, so if you could try to keep them like to 10 minutes ish, and let people discuss depending on how much discussion is going on. But sometimes we can run out of time, and given we have 2 projects and only like roughly 15 minutes of time, and another topic, we could do this. What I also recommend, obviously sharing any presentations you have here, but also in the tech channel while we're getting ready, and then also continuing conversations in the tech app delivery CNCF Slack channel, if they usually tend to get longer. I think it's great that we have discussions. I just want to be fair and give both of you the opportunity to actually present. So I'll play a bit of the checking the clock here. And it's also going to be recorded, and recordings will be available later on. I think we can share this also with different sources as well. So don't worry if not everybody's here immediately. You can use Twitter and other ways to share the recordings. All right. Okay, on the agenda for today, 2 project presentations. But first of all, we do intros. Intros are designed for people who are new here and just want to give people an opportunity to introduce themselves to the group here. How's your name, what you're doing, why you're here. If anybody wants to go first or wants to volunteer, feel free to do so.
I can go.
Yeah.
I'm there. I am with the Linux Foundation and I'm project manager with the CNCF. And I've got a short topic on
Rian, just
read-
1 second. You're really hard to understand due to the echo.
Let me change my microphone. Maybe that's the problem. Can you hear me better now?
That's much better, yes.
Okay, sorry, microphone gain was too high. I'm with the Linux Foundation, and I'm working with the CNCF as program manager to help tags with documentation and cleaning up. And I have met with most of the tags, and I have a short little topic that I want to discuss about that. Thank you.
Anybody else wants to introduce themselves to the group?
Sure, I can go next. Hey, my name is Paul McCarthy. I'm from Red Hat. I'm an engineering manager focused around the Kuadrant project. So I'm here today to present Kuadrant along with some of my colleagues.
I'll go
Okay.
next.
Okay, go.
So, sorry, Thomas. David Martin, I'm at Red Hat as well. I work with Paul and a few of the other guys on the call here. So I'm a software engineer working on the Kuadrant project.
Yeah, I'm Thomas. I'm another manager on the Kuadrant team. Here to support Paul and the rest of the team.
Right, great.
Hi.
I'm on the Quadrant project, also work with Dave and Paul.
And I'm
Yes.
Giga Salato. I'm also a software engineer with the Kuadrant team.
Yeah.
I'm Hubbard Smith. I'm a startup founder. Company's called I4 Ops.
All right. Akshay, or if I pronounce this correctly, hopefully.
Yeah, you got it.
All right.
My name's Akshay. I'm an engineer at a company called Buff, and I'm here to present Connect. And I think one of our other committers is here too. Matt, is that you?
Yep, that's me. Yeah, hi, I'm Matt. I work at Planet Scale, and I am a contributor to Connect.
All right, so then let's get started. First presentation of the day is Connect. Again, try to stick it to like roughly a 10-minute presentation time, giving people time to ask some questions. And as mentioned before, we can then continue the conversation. Sorry?
I just was gonna ask, otherwise, should we ask Rian to give his information from the Linux Foundation first?
That might actually allow it to drop. That's a good idea. So Rian, maybe you go first, and then we do the project presentations. Is 5 minutes good for you?
Only 2 minutes needed. Thank you very much
Okay.
for allowing me to go first. Okay, so we've been working with the CNCF, looking at the charters and the readmes of the tags. And a lot of the tags have a copy of the charter both in their own repo, but also in the TOC repo. And many of these are out of sync. Leadership changes, lists of projects being supported, and the difficulty for the tags to try and maintain both these documents. And then some of this information is also in the README, and that's also out of sync. So not talking specifically about your example, it's in general. So we did a whole research on all 8 tags. And out of that, we wrote a recommendation to the TOC how to update these. Basically moving down to one document for the charter, that it lives only in one place. My initial proposal was to make it only in the tag, but the TOC, I think, might change that to have it only in the TOC. And then also leadership, hyperlink to the TOC file. This is the leadership. The idea behind it all is not to create work, but to actually simplify. And whenever you update leadership or your charter, you only have to do it in one place. Don't have to remember where things are. So the TOC at the moment have time to comment on the document till beginning of February. And when they're done with that, I'll create issues and I'll show what we're going to move, where we're going to move it. And most of the work, I hope to bring the PRs and not just the issues to try and resolve. So I don't want to make work, I want to help.
Yeah, thanks. It's important to bring this up because usually the TOC one is the one that's done first when the tag is established, and then you work only in the tag repos. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I will sort that out. And if there's any questions, just ping me offline.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me go first.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and now we jump into Connect.
All right. Is it all right if I just grab the screen share and
Yes,
go off to
sure.
the races?
Hmm?
All right, let's do it.
And if you have slides, then please then also later on post them here so we can share them in the meeting notes.
I will. They are. I will post them in all of their Markdown glory. Hi. As I said, I'm Akshay. I'm here from Buff to present the ConnectRPC framework to y'all. Connect is a cross-language framework for building strongly typed RPC APIs. If you're familiar with Thrift or gRPC or Twerp or Captain Proto or any one of these variants, Connect is roughly analogous to those projects. Like many of those projects, it's technically schema agnostic, but in practice, it's almost always paired with protobuf schemas. And we're applying to join the CNCF as a sandbox project. I presented to Tag Network at the end of last year, and then the TOC recommended that I also come talk to you folks. So here we are. I'm going to assume that you all are broadly familiar with RPC as kind of a design paradigm, but just to cover some basics, today, most APIs are ad hoc. They're handcrafted HTTP and JSON. Colloquially, we often call these REST APIs. And building them it's laborious, it's pretty error prone, but this style of development has really mature tools and frameworks. You can think of things like Swagger and Postman and Insomnia and all of these rich ecosystem of testing tools. Schema-first approaches are still pretty niche. Our feeling is that part of that is because the existing frameworks to do this are really large, they're complex, they're difficult to adopt, and they are narrowly focused on one small set of users and use cases. And we built Connect to bring schema-first development to a much wider audience. To do that, we wanted to prioritize simplicity, interoperability with gRPC, and support for HTTP 1.1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to talk about each of those in a little more detail and show you some code snippets and stuff so you get a sense of what we're talking about. So what do we mean by simplicity? All the folks who work on Connect tend to be grumpy, scarred infrastructure folks, usually from like a networking or platform background. And so our feeling is that usually less is more. And so we're aiming for what we call production-grade simplicity. That means that Connect implementations have a handful of commonly used options, and they build on top of well-known, familiar, widely used HTTP2 libraries. In our view, less code means fewer bugs. So just to pick an example, gRPC Go is about 100,000 lines of handwritten Go that excludes generated code and comments. Connect Go is about 10,000 lines. That's 10x less. Fewer features means less API surface and fewer breaking changes. Instead of almost 100 options in gRPC Go, Connect Go has about a dozen. We build on top of an HTTP2 ecosystem or an HTTP ecosystem that developers are familiar with. Instead of reinventing that layer and kind of welding it to the RPC layer. That means that Connect's applications can coexist with other HTTP stuff. You can serve RPCs alongside web pages or HTMX or anything else. You can drop RPC into existing applications, and you can interop with the whole ecosystem of HTTP stuff that's out there in your language. Net HTTP in Go, URL session in iOS, OKHTTP on Android, et cetera, et cetera. And then we designed a protocol to be super boring, which means that it interops well with really mature tools like Perl. Fine, but what does all this look like in practice? As usual with protobuf stuff, you'll start with a schema. This is the schema for an implementation of the Eliza chatbot, which is this old example program. The main point is that this Eliza thing is pretending to be a psychotherapist. It accepts some input from the user and then responds with like an English sentence trying to get them to say more. The important thing to note here is not the details of the protobuf, but that This is the exact same schema that you would write for a gRPC service or for twerp or for anything else that uses protobuf. From this, you run a code generator, and then as the server owner, you have to implement your business logic. And I'm going to show you examples in Go, but this looks basically the same in any other language. So what does this look like in Go? Looks like this. You have a type to hang some methods off of, and then you write your method. And if you squint past the generics, which are new and a little bit unusual in Go, it's all pretty normal stuff. You got some headers. You can access your request message. In this case, it's that protobuf struct with the user's input sentence. And then you return a response and an error. It's bog standard Go. Everything that goes inside of here is just regular Go code that the user is writing. This, again, looks pretty similar to what you would get with gRPC or twerp. But from here, things take a little bit of a different spin. How, as a user, do you take this business logic and bind it to the network on the server side? In Go, your main function will look like this. You call this generated function, new Eliza service handler, and you pass it your implementation of the business logic and whatever options you'd like. And what you get back is a route and a handler. The route is a string. The handler is a standard Go net HTTP handler, which you mount up on, if you choose, the standard library's MUX. You can use any other MUX you like. You can also mount any other routes you like. You can serve your app's homepage. You can serve debug pages or Z pages, whatever you like. And then you just call listen and serve from the standard lib, and you're off to the races. Okay, what does the client look like? It's the inverse of this, and it has the same flavor. The client calls this generated new Eliza service client method, and you pass in a transport, which is just a standard HTTP client in Go, the URL of the server, and then whatever options you like. You get back this strongly typed client, which now has a say method, which takes the same protobuf request and deals in headers the same way. So this is what the code looks like, but what does it do? The important thing about Connect is that it serves multiple protocols simultaneously. So the handler you just saw uses content type negotiation to simultaneously support 3 RPC protocols: gRPC, gRPC Web, and Connect's own protocol. All the application code you saw is completely agnostic to the RPC protocol that's actually being used. So your clients can choose whatever protocol fits them best, and your business logic stays the same. On the client side, you can switch protocols with one config option. Again, all the rest of your code stays identical. Our intention here is to make sure that all the application code doesn't care about protocols, so you can swap between them as you like, with the idea that you're probably starting off in an ecosystem that has a bunch of gRPC stuff, and over time, you want to transition to use the Connect protocol. One note is that if you're using the gRPC protocol, we have a very extensive set of conformance tests, so you're guaranteed to interop seamlessly with all the code that's out there today. Connect's protocol was designed to have the same semantics as gRPC, but be simpler on the wire. So it supports streaming, pluggable encodings, leading and trailing metadata, so headers and like something that's sort of notionally trailers, structured errors with the same codes, and everything else you'd expect. But it does so without using HTTP trailers and without any specific opinions about HTTP framing. That means that it works over H1, H2, and H3. It works in web browsers. It works with every single HTTP proxy that has ever been written, and it works in serverless environments. So if you're doing request response RPCs, which is 80–90% of the RPCs out in the world, the entire protocol is basically curl --JSON. The project right now has been out in the public for about 1.5 years. We have stable implementations in Go and TypeScript. Our TypeScript stuff is aimed at the web platform and at Node.js. We have beta releases for mobile, Swift for iOS, and Kotlin for Android. Everything is Apache 2 licensed. It uses the CNCF code of conduct and CLA, and it has kind of a clear open governance structure. The project-wide decisions are made by all the maintainers, the committers to the individual implementations. And we're really happy to say we have committers from multiple companies now. So the bulk of the committers are still from Buff, but Matt from PlanetScale helps to maintain the Go implementation, and a guy named Eddie from Chick-fil-A helps to maintain the Swift implementation. Right now, we're working on C++ in-house, and our community has prototype Python and Rust implementations, which we'd love to bring into the fold this year. We're in production at organizations of all shapes and sizes. Adopters include PlanetScale, Red Panda, Grafana Labs, Chick-fil-A, Dropbox, banks, and a whole variety of other companies. They're all listed in the application issue. I'm going to skate past some of the CNCF stuff. I think hopefully that's pretty clear. A lot of the TOC and the tag network questions revolved around this cloud native integration and overlap area. I think bluntly, like Connect is pretty low level for this CNCF. It's sort of a component you would use to build cloud native infrastructure applications. So we don't have a ton of direct integrations. The project obviously is deeply in bed with the gRPC protocols. We include OTel, metrics and tracing kind of add-ons. And we've upstream support into Envoy for Connect's protocol. So you get automatic telemetry collection, and Envoy can actually translate between the Connect and gRPC protocols on the fly, if that's interesting for you. Outside the CNCF, the stuff is most similar to Tor. And the project sponsors Buff. We're a protobuf company. We build a from-scratch protobuf compiler and a schema registry. But all of the Connect stuff is fully separated out. Separate GitHub org, separate sort of permissions management, name, logo, website, et cetera, et cetera. And that's it. Questions?
First of all, thanks for the presentation. I think it was like very clear. It was great that you already have other companies joining it, using it in production.
That's why I asked Matt to join us. He was our first production user, I think like days after the announcement.
Yeah, I think you're actually good on the road even for like an incubation like requirements, depending on how far along you with governance and governance voting. What was the feedback from Tech Network?
They said it was good to go. I think we were all a little surprised that this fell into app delivery and not network, which is fine by me. I think having more eyes on it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe to share some background on this. I think obviously when we talk about app delivery, we also have like always this, where does app development fit? And this is kind of like an application development framework. There's a wider discussion going on around this. I think that's why they wanted you to talk to us as well.
No problem.
Yeah, I think for me it's actually pretty straightforward, especially accepting it into Sandbox.
Okay.
If you're using it, I think protocols are clear. Roadmap, I think you shared as well.
Yeah. Roadmap is always a little complicated for this because I think it's mostly issues in the individual projects, and then our intention here is that each of these implementations becomes, done, and we stop messing with it relatively soon. So there are implementations that don't have a ton of stuff happening inside the core runtime. But
yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a general guidance from somebody also being involved in open source projects. I think the roadmap just helps people where they can jump in, like what you want to build, because sometimes you get institutional contributors and they say, what should we do? And they come at organizations and not at like the individual issue level. But again, this is just decided like what you want to add next on the language side. You C++ in there. If there's other topics, I think that might just be something that's helpful.
There's a GitHub discussion with the 2024 roadmap.
Okay,
open.
perfect.
It's linked from the CNCF application issue.
Yeah, Josh, Thomas, and any comments from your side?
another reason why I think maybe they asked you to come here is we have heard from several API related frameworks in the past couple months. Have the
Mhm.
Curiosity Registry. We had a project from Google which had a number of enhancement proposals.
Yeah, the author of most of those works with me on Connect. He's employed at Buff.
Okay, yeah, I feel like I've heard some names before. So there's a nascent effort to actually establish some patterns and standards around API development. So the schema aspect that you were discussing at first kind of fits that. The protocol aspect kind of fits more with gRPC and the network
Yeah.
layer. But the schemas and helping app devs or infrastructure devs, we've actually been thinking about that some too. Like, how do we provide a little more structure or commonality amongst these new APIs that platform engineers are coming up with or that people are creating in Kubernetes?
I think our perspective on that is that that is ultimately a concern for like the AEP group. And that we Connect as a project consumes protobuf schemas, but does not really have any opinions about what they should look like or how they should be structured. As long as they're syntactically valid, we're happy. Buff as a company, of course, has a lot of opinions about this, and we write a protobuf compiler and all of that, but that's kind of a separate thing from this project.
I have an easy question for you. There is a package delivery, package deployment, package use, package management aspect that we're all interested in. How does Connect fit in with that? Is it straight up orthogonal, or is there overlap, or is there a lot of overlap?
It is Connect is orthogonal to that. So you can really think of Connect as just like a direct replacement for something like gRPC or Torque.
Okay.
And so you take the schema, you generate some code, and then what you do with the code is sort of up to you. And I assume many people will like package it for redistribution or turn it into a binary and distribute that, or distribute it in some containerized thing or whatever. Buff as a company in the schema registry kind of does a lot of work with distributing clients for RPC APIs, but that's separate from Connect.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you for the answer. And I heard you say that it was a sandbox project.
Yeah, we'd like to show a
CNCF
sandbox.
Which tag, is that the right word, Josh?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we're kind of discussing. So Tag Network, I guess, has helped with gRPC in the past, and this is very similar to gRPC itself, I guess. So that's why they presented to them first, and yeah, it's good to understand and apply to the API work that we have here. But I hear you that we're more at the design level, and you're kind of agnostic to design. Leave that up to someone else.
Yeah,
and thank you for taking the time to brief us. I know that this is kind of high friction, so thank you. We appreciate the effort.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, one more comment on my side, not necessarily required, but just as a tip, because I was running into this recently. I think what you should also look at, especially as you have a library that will be linked to code on the networking level. Now that's not relevant for other libraries. You, even for a sandbox, should think of a security or vulnerability disclosure process. There is
It's already up.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
It's on the ConnectRPC.com website. So there's a whole vulnerability disclosure process for CVs. We have run through it once with a bank. It turned out to not be an issue, but yeah, we've put at least a couple of miles on our stated process.
It's great. I was just bringing it up because people sometimes forget it, and especially as we are now moving more where like from just packaged software pieces here more into libraries. I think it becomes more relevant that this is actually required earlier on. But if you have it already, it's great. So I think from my side, there's no reason like not accepting this, honestly, especially in Sandbox. I mean, it will show how it evolves. I think the whole API management process, as Josh pointed out, it's coming up more and more. There's a number of initiatives. I think down the road, I think that's also why it's brought back to us. We might have to think of how to bring different projects together that try to work on several things, because there's obviously the always the opportunity to create a working group if something eventually comes up that's like worth getting you together on some collaboration beyond project scope. But
Yeah.
for the feedback on Sandbox, I would not see why it shouldn't be accepted. I mean, it sounds like a almost poster child Sandbox project that you're working on. Also, it seems there's no dependency on your commercial offering. I mean, you could obviously provide
No.
more, which is totally natural. So I think from Josh, from our perspective, good to go, right?
Yeah, I agree. This seems parallel to gRPC.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate the feedback.
Yes. Thank you. Also, like very interesting. And I would now switch over to Kuadrant.
Sure. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you can see that okay. All right. So first off, I'd just like to thank you all for providing us with the opportunity to talk about our project. We're very excited to talk about Kuadrant and share it with you. As requested, the presentation structure will be short and to the point to leave time for some Q&A. I'm joined here today by my colleague from Red Hat, David Martin. He will be providing a high-level architectural overview on the back half of the presentation, whereas I'll be kicking off the first half. All right, so let's get started. The very first question, what exactly is Kuadrant? And it's in the simplest form, the short answer is that Kuadrant is policies for Kubernetes gateways. The longer answer to that is that Kuadrant is a set of kube-native controllers, services, and APIs that provide gateway policies for existing Kubernetes gateway API providers on both single and multi-cluster environments. So I guess a key aspect to this is that everything we do in Kuadrant is around Gateway API. For anyone who's not familiar with Gateway API, it's an emerging standard for modeling service networking in Kubernetes, and it's used to solve complex networking use cases where perhaps a standard Kubernetes ingress may be deemed too limiting. In terms of the mission statement of our project, is to provide cluster admins with the ability to deploy, manage, observe, and protect services exposed via their gateways at scale, giving them the confidence to allow app developers to self-service, knowing that endpoints exposed via these gateways are compliant, secure, visible, and resilient. And I appreciate that's quite a mouthful, and we probably have some work to do to try and shorten that mission statement. But I'm hoping as we go through this presentation, things should become a little bit more clear as to what exactly we're doing. Just to give a quick overview on the current project status. So it is a Red Hat sponsored project. It originally began with 3 Red Hat engineers who are focused on developing service protection components. So we have a component within Kuadrant called Limitador that provides rate limiting capabilities. Likewise, we also have another component named Auth-Reno that provides both Auth-N and Z capabilities as well, some of which are being used in production today. Then the scope of the project expanded somewhat in the last 18 months to look at supporting multi-cluster architectures while continuing to enhance the existing service protection components. As it stands, we currently have a total of 18 Red Hat engineers assigned to this project full-time. And if we're to try to summarize where we're at today, it's that we're transitioning from early development to sharing for collaboration. So we feel like we're in a strong enough position to try and build out a community around this and try to get some adoption and engagement from the wider group. Community, I should say. With respect to community engagement, so the work done to date, we reside on the Kuadrant channel on the Kubernetes Slack workspace. We're actively engaged on the SIG Network Gateway API Slack channel and have conversations there. We presented Kuadrant at various conferences and user groups. So earlier, DevConf and DevStaff, but I guess more recently, we presented Kuadrant at the CNCF sponsored Cloud Native Barcelona meetup. We also have a proposal in place for KubeCon EU, and we're just waiting to hear back on whether or not that's going to be approved. We're also helping to progress proposals in SIG Network Gateway API, specifically around rate limiting and auth policies. We have a new component that was recently developed by David Martin, who will be speaking soon, for Gateway API state metrics, which was presented to the Envoy Gateway community and has since been adopted and included as part of the Envoy Gateway documentation as a user guide. We're also listed as a Gateway API integration on the official Kubernetes Gateway API documentation. And we have an active YouTube channel where we upload demos for new features being developed, and it's also used to host the recordings of our weekly community calls. And likewise, we have a Kuadrant.io website that gives a high-level overview of the project, links to getting started, and various other details. With respect to planned work, so we hope to soon present the project to the Kubernetes Network SIG. As I said, we're actively engaged within Gateway API, so we are known amongst the circle, but we still want to do some formal presentation to the wider group there. And today, while we're here, one of the other things we want to do is explore the possibility of looking to join the CNCF. So just very quickly touch on why CNCF. So for us, we see it as the ideal platform for gaining wider visibility with the goal of increasing community engagement and project adoption. We also feel that by joining CNCF, the Kuadrant will be closer to the cloud native community, providing the opportunity to collaborate with like-minded developers and end users. Greater exposure will lead to, or at least we hope will lead to, increased feedback and validation that what we're doing in Kuadrant is being delivered in the most effective manner. We're also very closely tied to existing CNCF projects. As mentioned, it's a Kube native project, but we're also tied into the likes of Envoy, Istio, and Submariner. And we also feel that if we're successful in our goals of growing our community and getting wider adoption, we feel that a strong governance model will also be required for the project. If we're to flip that around, so what does Kuadrant offer the CNCF? Well, we feel that the project will provide communities and enterprises with a solution for managing and enforcing gateway policies across both single and multi-cluster environments. It could potentially be seen as an exemplar project for the implementation of Gateway API, specifically around a Gateway API policy attachment pattern. We also have a shared library available as well from our GitHub organization called the Kuadrant Gateway API Machinery library, and that is used for implementing Gateway API policy controllers. And as mentioned, we complement existing CNCF projects. So a little bit more details on that, specifically around Istio. They have their Gateway API implementation, and we can provide our policies to further enrich the end user experience through the use of rate limit and authentication and authorization. And finally, with Submariner, we have a POC walkthrough. Again, I'll be sharing these slides afterwards. There's a link there in the slide deck for how Kuadrant and Submariner can combine to provide service resiliency across multiple clusters. So I'm just conscious of time. I will hand you over to David Martin, who's going to give a high-level architecture overview. David?
Thanks, Paul. So if you move on to the next slide, Paul, I'll talk through this. So high-level architecture. So we're looking at a single Kubernetes cluster. Now, Paul did mention multi-cluster. I'll talk a little bit about that on one of the following slides. But this is a single cluster. We have, the control plane aspects in the top half, and then the data plane aspects in the bottom half. So if we're to talk in sort of XACML terminology, we have like a policy administration point in the top part with the policy controllers, and the policy enforcement point in the bottom part being highlighted. So the administration piece, that's done via CRDs, custom resource definitions. So define your auth, rate limiting, etc. in the spec fields of that resource. And then we report back the status of that via the standard status fields in a Kubernetes resource. The enforcement piece, that's done via the Kuadrant data plane, or sometimes we call them service protection pieces, as requests arrive through the gateway. And that gateway on the left there, that's a gateway API compliant gateway, such as Istio, which you already mentioned. So we can move on to the next slide, Paul, and talk a little bit more here about those pieces, policy controllers. So we have the multi-cluster gateway controller in the hub. Now, it's called multi-cluster gateway controller, but that's kind of it's a starting piece that allows you can still do single cluster and then seamlessly move to multi-cluster. That's the thinking behind it. But that's where you can define your central gateway in like a hub cluster, and then that can get placed on one or more clusters via this controller. At this time, that controller also manages the TLS policy and the DNS policy resources, and pushes down the necessary pieces, such as certificates, for example, to whatever clusters the gateway is running on. For the DNS policy piece, that's slightly different in that it reaches out to the configured DNS provider, such as we have support for AWS Route 53 and Google Cloud DNS, though we are looking at Core DNS as well as an option for how we integrate that. So if that's done centrally, you can see how we can do some extra things if we have that awareness of multiple clusters with DNS. The Kuadrant operator, that is running, say, in the spoke or the workload clusters, or if it's single cluster, it's all the same. So that installs and manages two other components that Paul mentioned, Limitador and Auth-Reno. And you configure them via the rate limit policy and the auth policy CRDs. So we're in the process of moving all the policy pieces into this Kuadrant operator. The idea there is that we're kind of splitting the domain, so it's like the multi-cluster gateway piece, that's one piece. Take that TLS and DNS piece and just keep it with all the other policy stuff. So we're in the process of that. That'll just clean things up a little bit from the architecture side. The multi-cluster gateway controller, it does, we'll say it does integrate with OCM, Open Cluster Management, for doing some of the multi-cluster stuff, though we are doing some proof of concepts around, well, what other options are there? What if we don't have OCM? Can we still provide some of the multi-cluster DNS pieces without that? Next slide, Paul. So those two main policy enforcement components, Limitador and Auth-Reno. Starting with Limitador, so that exposes a HTTP API to apply and observe limits, so request limits for traffic. It also exposes a gRPC service that integrates with Envoy proxy. So that complies with the Envoy global rate limit API. So configured via the rate limit policy CRD and managed by the Limitador operator. That uses a WASM filter in Envoy to call out to Limitador. So that's how we do that integration piece. Auth-Reno exposes a gRPC service as well. It integrates with Envoy proxy, and that complies with the external auth API in Envoy. And that's configured via auth policy CRD managed by Auth-Reno operator. So it has support for, say, JWTs, API keys, MTLS, OPA, and a bunch of different, other different, say, auth policy things. Next slide. So one other piece mentioned, say, a WASM piece that integrates with Envoy. That's what this piece is, the WASM plugin. Right now, that's used to integrate with Limitador, but we're planning to use that to also do the auth piece, so it's a bit more portable. So there's one aspect of that that would say only work with Istio right now, but we want it to work with any, say, gateway API implementation. So WASM we see as the way to kind of do that. So that's the high level overview there. If you move on, Paul, I think there's only one other slide, which is just a summary. So yeah, just calling out the existing policies. And in the future plans, we do want to expand on the policies feature set. So for example, looking at multi-cluster rate limiting and shared counters, managing consistency across regions. I mentioned Core DNS as well for kind of expanding different DNS implementations we can work with. Other policies, I guess, as use cases dictate, such as maybe a CORS policy or some other things you may want to do via policy with gateway traffic. So yeah, that's it. Is there one more slide, Paul, or is straight into questions, you think? Yeah, so we'll open it up to questions there.
Yeah, I would open it up to questions. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So if I'm coming more from the governance side here, I think before we jump into the technical one. So currently it is still Red Hat contributors or maintainers only.
Yeah, that's correct for the most part. The specific component Auth0 does have external adopters, and we're actually looking to reach out to those adopters to see if they're willing to go on record to list in our adopters file for that repository. But for the most part, it's Red Hat engineers working on the project.
What's your plan on engaging, like especially external maintainers? Because eventually, if you want to move to incubation, I think you need a plan to get people to maintain, or what is like who are the people, companies you're looking for to potentially contribute? You don't need to name them, but just like giving a rough idea, because I think that's always the toughest one, like getting other organizations usually to contribute. And I see it very often in the slides. The people said that the CNCF and moving into a sandbox will help you there. I think it helps you, not talking against the CNCF, but it helps you less than you might expect. I think it's key for you to have like this community's growth strategy, who you want to reach out, who you want to engage, how you want to make it possible, contribute the letters, these kind of things. I think that's just central as you want to move in that direction. So I think there was a lot. I think the question is like what's your plan on getting contributors outside of the current contributor base from other orgs, and who you're looking for? That's like the two questions maybe.
Yeah, so I guess that the main thing that we really need to focus on, as I've said, we're kind of in early development, we're now ready to try and spread the word. So we are quite active in that. We're looking to identify conferences such as KubeCon EU, for example, to try and get a stage or a platform to start sharing Kuadrant. And we are looking at other forums. There are also, I guess, other opportunities to explore with respect to, for example, one of the Gateway API implementations we're looking at supporting in the near future will be Envoy Gateway. So we're going to be active within that community, kind of showcase what we're doing and see what we can do there to try and collaborate and add support. So I guess really the main focus with respect to our group, what we're trying to do is just identify the necessary platforms to try to spread the word around Kuadrant. And I do appreciate that while the CNCF sandbox is certainly something we want to do with respect to community engagement adoption, I also appreciate that it's not the reason why we're doing it. We also appreciate that it's down to us as a group to try to spread the word separately. And of course, CNCF might be able to provide some opportunities there, but our strategy is not to use CNCF as the way to try and grow our community.
I think it's just key to like have the strategy. That's why I was asking and on how you want to build it. Because at some point you will need institutional contributors or contributors who can dedicate like full-time time on it, whether it's from like vendor like companies or end users. That's I think the key question that moves the project forward.
Just to add to that, so another angle that we're looking at is, so we're very active in SIG Gateway API, which is a sub-SIG of SIG Network. And we don't want to be doing what we're doing in, say, a vacuum. So we're taking what we're doing and see, can we standardize this in some way? So we're working with some people in Gateway API on gateway enhancement proposals or GEPs. By doing that, hopefully we get more engagement there. And if people are kind of like, oh, yeah, it makes sense to implement some of these things, then we can be like, well, we have implementations as references potentially, and that could be a way we get people in as well. So there's a few angles we're keen to hit on to try and get that engagement and move on to the next step beyond Sandbox for sure.
Yeah, it's just something to think about. I also want to give Josh the opinion to speak for the tag.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just wondering if there are other implementations of these additional policies for Gateway API. Is that what you're saying with the GEPs? Make that a more general protocol?
Exactly, yes. So there's this policy attachment gateway enhancement proposal as a standard way to do policies that you can attach to a gateway. We want to go a little step further and define a standard for doing specific types of policies, such as a DNS policy or TLS policy, and then implementers can come along and implement it in whatever way they want. Does that answer your question, Josh, or was there something I missed?
Yeah, just is anyone else pursuing something similar, or it's Quadrant the main implementation?
I got you. So I might have to rely on a few other people, but my own take is for some of these specific policies we're working on, I'm not aware, but there's lots of people say active on the policy attachment piece. Maybe Guy or
Yeah, I'd
Craig, do you
say-
guys
say
have a bit
most-
more? Or Thomas, yeah.
Most works are active in actually the implementation part, like implementing the gateway API, and not so much in the policies. So I think one of the strengths of the Quadrant project is that it could potentially work with any implementation, which was the Envoy gateway example, which is just a implementation, but all of them support policies. So we're writing policies potentially to support all gateway API implementation. If that answers your question.
That makes sense. I'm happy that you're also going to talk to SIG Network. This definitely is deep in SIG Network's domain. So I mean, they can watch this recording too, but they might have more questions.
Yeah, I think this like compared to the other one is definitely more in the SIG network space.
Yeah, it's nice to have some awareness for API folks, I guess, since we were talking about APIs a bit, but they'll definitely be deeper in the gateway API.
Did you talk to them already, or is it supposed to be like this recording that you want to share with them, or are you going to present to them as well?
It's something that's on our to-do list. We hope to do it soon.
Yeah, because in this case, I would defer the decision more or less to them, honestly.
I mean, we have Envoy and things like that. I guess it wouldn't really fit within Kubernetes itself as one of the SIGs. So, but yeah, they'll know whether they'll have a more relevant vote here.
I mean, don't get this wrong. I think there is definitely a great value in what you're doing, but how it fits into like the overall networking and gateway API ecosystem, I think is better to judge from a SIG network perspective than from us here.
Sure, understood. Thanks.
Okay, I think then we covered all topics for today. 2 great presentations. Thanks, both of you. One thing I always love about these, beyond seeing new projects, I always learn something new as well. So that's also great. And again, 2 great presentations. Yeah, as always, I encourage you to watch the channel of the tech, because some people might watch the videos later on as this video, as we publish it, they might have some more questions. So looking in there over the next couple of days, or posting any material so that people can reach out to you if they have more questions, is, I think, definitely beneficial. But that's something we also have seen, that not everybody's able to join these meetings, and to give them all an opportunity to ask you questions and comment on it. Yeah, I think that's it for this week, right, Josh?
Yep, that's all that's on our agenda. We meet again first week in February.
Exactly. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining today, and see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Take care.
So.